One benefit we always have this time of year for those of us who come up and speak is there's always a good topic to speak about. You know, anytime that you get close to a holiday, especially one that's like Christmas or Easter, it makes preparing a sermon relatively easy, because we can go ahead and we can say, okay, these are the sermons or the sermon topics that we can go ahead and give at this time during the year. Now, occasionally you'll find somebody strange. We had one pastor one time that on Mother's Day spoke about fathers, and on Father's Day spoke about mothers. It was an interesting way of doing it. He was a young pastor, and he thought it would be fun, and they were good messages. They just were kind of opposite what you would normally expect. The title of this message is Christmas Gifts. So we're going to be talking a little bit about Christmas gifts this morning. Can anyone guess what the most expensive Christmas gift that was actually an official Christmas gift was ever given? Yeah, the most expensive one.
Lamborghini.
I was going to say that.
It's not our comprehension problem here. Are you talking about money?
Well, yeah, price-wise, yes, price-wise.
Oh. I was going to say...
Well, Lamborghini would be a good guess,
Airplane?
but what's that?
Flying an airplane, a jet?
Well, you know, that would also be there. The most expensive one that we know of, that's an actual verifiable Christmas gift, was a Russian billionaire bought his daughter an $88 million apartment in Manhattan for a Christmas present.
Oh, dear.
That's a fairly expensive and elaborate Christmas gift. Over the years since Jesus was born, the tradition of giving gifts to friends and loved ones during Christmas time has continued to grow and evolve. Many traditions across the globe really focus more on things like small gifts. They're like little handmade things, or they focus on treats and sweets and little tiny toys for kids. You know, everybody remembers, in America, stockings are sort of a tradition, but if you go over to Holland, what do? They put their wooden shoes out, right? And that's what gets filled with things. So there's only so many things that you can fit inside of a wooden shoe. Stockings you can make relatively big. Has anybody been down to Jamboree over in Ness?
Big stocking.
Yeah, they have a gigantic stocking.
And we're giving it away.
It's like 8 feet tall, all right, and 2 feet wide. So it's this gigantic stocking filled with things.
You know when she asked me one day, do you want this drawing for this giant sock? I said, no, thank you.
Yeah. So, they do have those sorts of things. But, typically speaking, they're smaller gifts. Then you have the people like the Russian billionaire who he says, let me go ahead and buy my 22-year-old daughter an $88 million apartment. But there's another Christmas present that was even more costly or more probably more expensive, I should say is the better word. And it goes further back in history. So that apartment thing was just recent, within the last 5 or 6 years. But back during the time of Catherine the Great, which is one of the royalty for Russia, her husband is rumored to have bought her what is called the Orlov diamond. All right? And the Orlov diamond is a 190 carat diamond. And it does not have a price on it because it's so expensive. It's considered to be more expensive than the jewels that they have for the English royalty, the royal crown and everything in England. More expensive than that. If you think of 190 carats,
I wonder what it would look like. How big is it?
It's larger than a chicken egg.
Oh, larger than a chicken?
Yes, it's huge. So it's very, very large. All right, so very, very large. That's probably the most expensive earthly gift that probably has ever been given. We were reading, I think it was last night, that there was a total of $220 billion worth of gifts that are purchased between Thanksgiving and New Year's Day on an annual basis. That's just here in America, $220 billion. And despite the amount of money that's spent each year, the initial gifts upon which this tradition were based were also pretty extravagant. I'm sure that you all recognize that from the song that we sang, the We Three Kings message. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. These are pretty pricey gifts that it was based on, at least at that time. And today we're going to go ahead and take a look at those first three gifts. and we're going to see what they signify and how they can guide us in the way that we are selecting gifts to go ahead and give this Christmas season. So let's go ahead and have a word of prayer before we go into the Word of God. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for giving us the opportunity to be alive. And we ask, Lord, that you would please help our hearts and minds to be open to receive your word and receive your instruction this morning. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, to set the stage for what we're going to be studying this morning, I'd like us to go to Matthew chapter 2. And I think for the most part, we're going to exclusively be in Matthew chapter 2. So we're going to be taking a look at Matthew chapter 2 because this is entitled, at least in my Bible, Wise Men from the East. Okay? Matthew chapter 2. Here we're going to go ahead and pick up the Christmas Advent account right after Jesus' birth. Okay? Matthew 2 verses 1 through 2 say, Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born the King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and have come to worship him. Reading this passage, one fact often escapes the Hollywood versions of the Advent account. The Magi, or the wise men, do not even meet Herod until after Jesus has already been born. How many people have seen some sort of Hollywood portrayal, and the wise men are on the way to Bethlehem, and they stop in Jerusalem, and they meet Herod, and Jesus hasn't even been born yet, right? That's the way that Hollywood typically depicts it. You know, most retellings of the event show the kings from the east came upon Jesus the first night he was born. All right? Obviously, they had noted the star months before his birth, and they took a long journey to arrive in Judea. But what does this say? Does this say that the three kings met him the night he was born? No, they didn't even meet with Herod until after Jesus had been born. And I doubt they met Herod in the middle of the night on the night of Jesus' birth. Right? That's not typically how you meet a magistrate or a king of another nation. You typically set up a time to meet with them during the daytime. Now, as we continue to read, you'll find another peculiar description of what's going on here. So let's go ahead and take a look at Matthew chapter 2, verses 9 through 11. All right? Matthew chapter 2, verses 9 through 11, it says, When they heard the king, they departed, and behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. And when they had come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented gifts to him, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, before we discuss the gifts themselves, I want you to again look at the description of Jesus. How is Jesus referred to in this passage? Both of the verses say it.
A young child.
Yes, he's referred to as being a young child, or in some translations, just child. Okay?
In a house.
Yeah, we're getting there too, right? So also, if we look at the beginning of verse 11, we find that there's no longer a manger, but a house where the child is found. And I want to point out these issues, not to detract from the story itself, but to reaffirm that you can't trust what you see in Hollywood. All right? You can't go with just what the tradition is. You need to go with what the Bible says. All right? So here we see that Jesus is not visited in the manger or in a manger scene by the three wise men, but rather that he is found in a house. So despite the fact that it's a lovely manger scene that we have over here, it's probably not biblically accurate based on what we've read. Okay? Also, we go ahead and we read that this is, Jesus is a young child. It's not referred to as an infant, not referred to as a baby, not referred to as a babe. These are the other words that we see Jesus referred to as in other parts of the Bible, but not in reference to this story. So even though, if you go ahead and you take a look at the Catholic tradition says that there are 12 days of Christmas. Does everybody know? Everybody knows the song, the 12 Days of Christmas, but it's based on the fact that there traditionally, in a Catholic point of view, are 12 days of Christmas, starting on Christmas Day and going until, anybody know?
New Year's?
January 6th.
Oh, January 6th.
All right?
Oh.
January 6th. And on January 6th, you have Three Wise Men's Day, or the Epiphany is what they call it, right? So Three Wise Men's Day. So if you go to some countries, Latin American countries especially, where there's a heavy Catholic influence, you'll see that they don't really exchange gifts on Christmas Day like we do here in America. They wait until the day of the Epiphany on January 6th or Wise Men's Day to go ahead and do that. It's known as 3 Wise Men's Days, and even this 12-day period is probably not enough to cover what actually went on. All right? It probably wasn't just 12 days from Jesus' birth. In fact, most of the people, if you look at our Seventh-day Adventist commentary on this section, they say that it was at least 40 days. All right? They feel that Jesus was at least 40 days old before the wise men came. But you'll go ahead and we'll find out here in just a minute that could have been a much longer time. If you go ahead and take a look at Matthew chapter 2, verse 16, we're going to go ahead and read that together. We know that the time between the birth and the gifts could be as much as 2 years. Okay? As much as 2 years. It says, Matthew 2, verse 16, Then Herod, when he saw that he was deceived by the wise men, because remember, the wise men did what? Did they go back to tell Herod what was going on? No, they didn't. They went home by a different way. So Herod was deceived by the wise men. He was exceedingly angry, and he sent forth and put to death all the male children who were in Bethlehem and all its districts from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had determined from the wise men. So obviously, the wise men had told Herod that, hey, we saw this star, and it could have been up to 2 years ago, right? That they first saw it and they started to make their journey. Because remember, it takes a long time to travel before you had cars and trains and airplanes, all right? Everybody remembers, for America, we think of the Wild West and when people were moving from the East Coast over here. But remember, when they were making those journeys, we had pretty much gone ahead and gotten to the pinnacle of horse and buggy, capabilities, right? They had all sorts of things that they could go ahead and do to fix, and they had some towns that had already been established for most people. This is not the case over there in the Middle East. You go for miles and miles without seeing anything, and that's in today's society. When I was over there, we would go ahead and we would travel from the base to the main city, and you would go for like an hour and not see anything except for desert and rock. You might see like a little hut, like that. Everybody know what a yurt is? It's a kind of tent, right? You'd see a yurt once in a while off in the distance. You'd see a bunch of goats outside of the yurt. That was all that you saw for miles and miles around. And this is why
water. Did you see any water when you traveled?
There was very little water where I was at. Very little water.
So, what were those goats drinking and eating?
Oh, there was little water. They had wells.
Oh, they had wells.
Oh yeah, they still have wells over there. You guys remember hearing about the wells of Jacob and things like that? The same sort of thing is all over the place there. They'll find wells.
What about for grazing?
They're shrub.
Shrubs.
Yeah, little tiny shrubs. Yeah.
But not grass. They could only
Not a lot.
They could only travel at night if they were following the star.
Yeah, and on top of that, there's a lot of discussion about that one too, whether or not the star was a star, if it was a supernova, which could be seen during the day. We don't know. We know that it was angels that was up there at some point for sure, especially since stars don't typically stop over buildings, right? Has anybody ever seen a star stop over a building before? I've yet to see that.
Only in pictures.
What's that?
Only in pictures.
Only in pictures. Very good. All right. So the 3 wise men, or the kings of the East, or the Orient, are described traditionally as being 3 people. These are the traditions, of course. Melchior, Caspar, and Balthasar. However, these names are not traced in the Bible at all, right? They're not found in the Bible. They're traced back to the 8th century, and that's about as early as we can say that this is where we find these names from. So they're not probably accurate. Indeed, the Bible doesn't actually refer to the number 3, does it? It just says wise men. So you'll go ahead and you'll read some accounts that talk about 3 wise men, and other accounts talk up to 12 wise men that I have seen.
Oh dear.
But the tradition of the 3 wise men is based on the 3 gifts, right? The gold, the frankincense, and the myrrh. Hence why we have the hymn, We 3 Kings. But were there 3? Were there 12? Who knows? Does it matter? Probably not. The whole point is that we are sure, because the Bible tells us, that they were real people. So some people say, oh, this is just, a fanciful thing that was added in. Well, if you take the Bible at face value, which we're supposed to most of the time, the Bible says that they had these people, these kings from the East, that came and delivered gifts to Jesus. So this is something that really happened. Otherwise, I would ask the question, why would it be that Herod sent people to go and kill all of the male babies in Bethlehem? It would only happen if he got upset because the wise men didn't tell him who Jesus was, right? So we can be certain that these people were real. We just don't have the right number necessarily. We don't know who they were. But they were coming in with a specific purpose, and that was to pay homage to Christ, all right? They're like, we want to know where the King of the Jews is. And he's a newborn king. And he's like, a child? Yes, it's a child, a newborn king. So they were told where to go, and that's where they went. So why were they bringing gold and frankincense and myrrh to begin with? Does anybody have any ideas?
It's a purpose, because they had to flee for their lives, so they had to have an expense.
So that is what happened to the gifts after they were given, and we will get to that. But why bring it to begin with? Jeremiah?
So is it, they're treating like a king? Yeah.
Very good. So even today, if you are the head of state and you go and visit some other country to see their head of state, you traditionally bring something as a gift to them, often from your country. All right? So if the governor of Kansas goes to meet the governor of California, the governor of Kansas might go ahead and bring buffalo jerky, or they might go ahead and bring sunflower seeds, or they might go ahead and do something like that, right? What was that, Madeline?
So Putin got a gift, and it was a puppy, and someone grabbed the puppy from the neck.
Okay. So, but you could go ahead and you could find those sorts of gifts. In this particular case, you're talking about something extravagant. And most of the time, when you go and visit somebody who's of higher station than you will bring as extravagant a gift as you can afford. So over in England, I know that we don't have this here in America quite so much, but in England, you obviously have the king, right? And then you have the viscounts, and you have the dukes and the earls and all those other people. So you have all these different levels of royalty or of nobility. So if the duke is going to go visit a viscount or is invited to go visit the king, they're going to bring something extravagant. But every level that you go up, it's going to be a more extravagant gift. So if you are a king from one country visiting a king of a larger country, it's still going to be a very extravagant gift. Okay? So these three wise men, or often known as the Magi or the three kings, they are bringing extravagant gifts to somebody that they feel is of higher stature than they. Okay? Because, yes, they're kings of the East, but they recognize that there's something important about this king that they're going to go visit. He's not just some king that's out there that is just of this. I mean, think about it. Judea isn't even being ruled by itself at this point in time, right? Who's ruling Judea?
That's why they were called wise men.
But who's ruling Judea at the time?
Herod?
No. The Romans were. Okay? Herod was there to go ahead and kind of just be the paperhead. But he was not the ruler of Israel. Because if they said, we're looking for the king of the Jews, Herod could have said, well, I'm the king of the Jews. But he didn't. Right? He didn't, because he could not say that he was king, because they have one king, and his name is Caesar. So, they were going and they were trying to find the king of the Jews, and they knew that he was a special king because he was born king. He wasn't just a king that was following a lineage, he was born king of the Jews. And they had read and studied, and they knew that this was the fabled king, or the king that was prophesied from God. So let's take a look at some of these gifts that they brought. First and foremost, gold. Who doesn't like gold, right? If you're going to go ahead and give a gift, gold is a great place to start. Why? Because gold is pretty expensive even today. Does anybody know what the current price of 1 ounce of gold is here in America? Take a guess.
$1,000?
No.
More.
A million.
No, not much less than $2,600. That's how much gold is going for per ounce right now. Okay? So when you go ahead and you think of this as far as how valuable things could be, everybody remembers the talents of gold that were given. A master, he's going away, he gives 5 talents to one and 2 to another and 1 to another. Do you know how much a talent weighs? 125 pounds. Okay? That equates today's value, just to give you an idea, of about $5 million. Okay?
Wow.
So that's a lot of. I don't think that the kings were bringing him, a talent worth of gold, but they brought him some gold, and it was going to be something that he could use. So gold can go ahead and be used pretty much anywhere, right? back in the day, you used to be able to go to the bank and take your little banknote and ask for gold, and they'd give you some gold, right? Anybody have any of those gold certificates in any of their collections at home? Yeah, no? So, Kenny, do you remember the gold notes or silver notes?
Did your parents have any?
No? Okay.
My
So,
parents didn't have any.
we call our money greenbacks now because it's not based on anything, but back in the day, you had gold back and silver back, which meant that you could go ahead and give this money to the bank, and they would give you the amount of gold or silver that it was worth.
When did that stop?
Oh, that stopped back in...
Long time?
No, back in the early 1900s.
1900s?
Yeah. We got off of the gold system a while back. I think I have one $10 silver note that I got in. It was just given to me at like a Walmart.
Really?
You know, yeah. So I have one of those in my collection, but I don't have any of the gold back notes. Anyway, so we don't know exactly how much gold was being given, but we know that it was probably a valuable amount. Okay, and why was gold being given? Well, there's no definitive answer in the scriptures to tell us why, but there's basically two reasons. Number one, it's universally accepted as being an extravagant gift. Gold was precious back in those days too. Even with all of the technology that we have to mine gold, it's still hard to find. Okay? But the other thing is that gold represents royalty, because people who traded in gold a lot were very wealthy. There's a movie that we watch as a family every year. Okay? It's called The Nativity Story.
Can you show that sometime? I've never seen it.
Oh, sure. We can go ahead and maybe show that
Like
at some
family
point.
night or something?
Sure. I don't see why not.
Church family.
But the whole point is that it's got a little bit of a Catholic flavor to it, because they do talk. I mean, the whole story is leading up to the birth of Jesus, right? So it's a lot about Mary. It's a lot about the three wise men. But the whole point behind it is that there's a line in there that he says that the first person who's bringing the gift to Jesus says, "Gold for the King of Kings," right? Acknowledging that this is the highest ranking person that has ever lived on this planet. All right? Very similar, and I'm just going to go ahead and say it from this standpoint, very similar to how Melchizedek was considered to be the highest priest, right? We know that Jesus is a priest of the order of Melchizedek, right? So, Melchizedek, he is the priest of all priests in this particular in that particular scenario. Jesus is being recognized here as being the king of all kings. And that was probably the reason why the king from the east, or the wise man, was bringing gold to Jesus. The second gift. Traditionally, the second gift is what? Frankincense, right? I love the three kings. It's just all in order, right? Gold and frankincense and myrrh. So, frankincense. Does anybody know what frankincense is?
It's a resin from a tree in the Middle East.
Very good. Somebody has studied. So yes, Randy, you're absolutely right. It is a tree resin, and it's in the name. All right, frankincense. It is used as incense. Most of the time, it's used in some form of worship. Right. So when you go ahead and you take a look at the Old Testament, you read about the tabernacle, and you read about the altar of incense. What was burned there was most likely a combination of things, but majority is frankincense. It's a fragrant resin, and it comes from the boswellia tree. How many people take boswellia for their joints and pain and everything like that? The same stuff, right? So same tree. So boswellia plant species is where they get this from. In addition to the incense, frankincense was also placed on top of, anybody know? In the tabernacle, what was it placed on top of? No, the showbread. It was placed on top of the showbread, and it was a memorial, and this is coming from Leviticus 24, verses 5 through 7. It was a memorial portion of the food offering to the Lord. All right, in Psalm 141, the incense is also equated to prayer that is set before God. So interestingly, the bread, which also represents Jesus, is topped with frankincense, which represents prayer, connecting the priests and the Levites to God through the bread of life and through prayer. So frankincense is deeply connected with the priesthood of the Jewish nation. Thus, again to quote the movie, frankincense for the priest of all priests. Again, we know that Jesus serves as our high priest currently, and he held that position even here on earth. And we know that he was a priest not through the order of Aaron, okay, because Jesus' lineage does not point back to Aaron, does it? It goes through David, which is through Judah. So he's not connected to that. we know that he has a higher order, an order above Aaron. And that would be the order of Melchizedek. Okay? That's what we're told in the book of Hebrews as well. So lastly, the last gift that we see in the three wise men is myrrh. All right? So myrrh, again, it's another aromatic substance. In this case, it's not as much of a resin. So when you think of resin, it's going to be sort of a hard, dried thing that you can burn. Myrrh is considered to be more of an oily resin, all right? So it's more of an oil that you go ahead and you use. It was used for perfumes, ointments, salves, tinctures. Anything medicinal would often have myrrh in it, okay? I don't know if it would make it taste better necessarily, but, anytime that you think of medicine, anything that smells strong must be really good stuff, right? That's why Vicks Vapor Rub works so well, because it's nice and strong. So, maybe back then they had a myrrh vapor rub type of thing. I don't know. But myrrh is essentially, you can again find it from different plants in the Middle East and the Far East. But I would liken it mostly to camphor or to menthol. Okay, so it's got a very pungent odor. It's something that you can recognize as soon as you smell it. So this is used in a lot of different ways, like I said, in medicines and in cosmetics, but it was also commonly used in the burial and embalming process, okay? So the myrrh is frequently associated, and we can see it even in the song that we sang earlier, in the We Three Kings, it's associated with Jesus' death, okay? So myrrh was given as a gift, yes, because it was costly, but it also foreshadows Jesus' crucifixion and his death, and would be used essentially for going ahead and embalming his body. Now, the myrrh that he was given as a child was not used as the embalming medicines that they were using. It's not like he kept it for 33 years, okay? That's not what happened. It's just a symbol, right? Just like the gold that Jesus had is not going to be used in the crown of glory that Jesus comes to earth again with, all right? That's not how it works. But it is a symbol of what was to come. So what can we learn about these gifts? How do they help us during this season? First, we ought to reflect on the meaning behind the gifts. Gold for the king, frankincense for the priest, myrrh for the sacrifice. Much like our need to focus on the life, death, and resurrection of Christ daily, we're told we should take an hour a day to reflect on the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. We should meditate, especially this time of year, on the roles that Jesus holds as being the king, the priest, and the lamb. Second, just as the gifts of the Magi were meant to be homage to the newborn king, our gifts that we give to other people should also honor God. All right, they should be paying homage to him. Following the track of gold, financial gifts, that's fine. If you're going to go ahead and give a financial gift, gifts that will help a person financially, either for their own necessities, free love offerings and things like that, or for things that they otherwise would not be able to purchase for themselves. Examples that I would go ahead and give for that is there was a time where we had a family that we knew of when we were over in Parsons that they only had one vehicle, but they had how many kids did they have, Madeline? 5? 6 kids? They had a lot of kids. Yeah. So they had a lot of kids, and they didn't have any way of transporting them all. They were always having to just take half of their family to go to church. So we worked with a couple of different people. We worked with our church. We worked with our family. Another person was willing to go ahead and give. So we went ahead and we put money together. We bought them a minivan for them. All right. It was not at Christmas time, but it was near. It was in the springtime shortly after. But we found out about their need at Christmas time. So those sorts of gifts are definitely something that will bring honor to Jesus, because you can say this is a gift that we are giving because we know that this is going to be a blessing to you, and God has inspired us to get this for you. So that is one kind of a gift. I'm not saying you need to go out and buy cars for people, okay? But that's the kind of gift that you can go ahead and orient yourselves toward. Something else that you can go ahead and take a look at. Looking at frankincense. Gifts of a religious or spiritual nature are also appropriate. So Bibles, devotionals, hymnals, instruments, notebooks, journals, anything that you can think of that will help to enrich the relationship of the person with God. These are all things that are definitely worthwhile in going ahead and giving people so that it will help to uplift them and bring them closer to God. And then gifts related to myrrh could include sacrificial type gifts. Now, I'm not saying that you go ahead and give them like a death policy, all right, for insurance. I'm not suggesting that. What I am suggesting, however, is that you can go ahead and you can give a sacrificial gift, such as gifting your time and energy to them. There are many people that the thing that they need is not money, but they need help around the house. You know, they might have a project that needs to be done, but they don't have anybody to do it. A great example is we had a neighbor that she needed to have her gutters cleaned. And she was not comfortable getting up on a ladder to get the gutters cleaned out. So the boys went over and helped to go ahead and clean out her gutters. All right? Jeremiah thought it was fun.
So did I, until my hands are getting cold.
Yeah, there's plenty of opportunity for gutter cleaning business if that's what you would like to go ahead and do. All right? If you want to have fun, you're going to have fun all over town, I'm sure. But that is one example that you can go ahead and do if you know that there's a need like that. Additionally, it could go ahead and be something that is more cosmetic related. So, giving a gift, to your wife of some perfume, or to your husband of some cologne, or if you know that they like some aromatic type teas, you can go ahead and give them some teas. These are all things that are fine to go ahead and give as well. They will be a blessing to somebody, and you can go ahead and point it back to, hey, this is something that we can use to celebrate Jesus together. So the usefulness of a gift is not universal. But in the case of the Magi, like Judy had brought up earlier, these gifts did serve a singular purpose. We all know that shortly after, as we read in chapter 2, verse 16, shortly after the Magi had left Bethlehem, Herod sent the people to go and kill all of the males. Well, what happened to Jesus during that time?
Went to Egypt.
He went to Egypt. Exactly. I'm so thankful that you read that earlier. I mean, I don't have to go over all of that stuff again. But the decree went out to kill every male under the age of 2, and Mary, Joseph, and Jesus, they went off to Egypt. And for 12 years, maybe up to 12 years, I should say, because I don't know for sure, maybe up to 12 years, he was over in Egypt. And what did they do for money? They had to have money to travel over there. It wasn't like Joseph was a rich, carpenter. I don't know if that might be the definition of an oxymoron. All right, a rich carpenter. It's not something that you typically go ahead and see. Okay, I'm not saying that you can't make a living, but you're not typically, have bags full of gold if you're a carpenter, especially back then. But he had money that he was able to go ahead and travel with his family and sustain them as they were trying to get set up in Egypt. And then, of course, having some of that money in reserve to go ahead and come back. So there was definitely a purpose behind the gifts that were given by the Magi. I'm going to go ahead and share a story about a special kind of Christmas gift to go ahead and emphasize that it's not the price of a gift that makes the difference. Okay? Does anybody know what these are called? Poinsettias. Okay. Does anybody know from whence they come?
Mexico?
They come from Latin and South America. You cannot plant them here; they will not grow. Okay. I wish that they could. Down in Florida, where I grew up, we actually had some poinsettia plants that we planted, and they lived for years and years. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now in Latin, how big did they grow? Because I've read articles that they're very, very big in some places.
The ones that we had in Florida, where I grew them, they got to be about 4 feet tall.
Right. I've heard
They're a good sized bush. Okay, but they would die. They would eventually go ahead and go through the cycle of like they would just not be blooming. They would just be green. They turn red during the winter time.
Come back in the next year?
Yeah. But it doesn't die off. But you don't have
the dormant.
Yeah, it goes dormant, and you don't see the red on it. All right, the red only comes out this time of year. So does anybody ever hear the legend of the poinsettia? All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and read it this morning as something. Now, again, as all legends and folklore go, take everything with a grain of salt. It's probably not 100% true, but this is just an exercise in understanding more about gift giving. So, the legend is told of Pepita, who's a poor Mexican girl who had no gift or present to present the Christ child at Christmas Eve services. Okay, as Pepita walked slowly to the chapel with her cousin Pedro, her heart was filled with sadness rather than joy. And Pedro asked, I'm sure, Pepita, that even the most humble gift, if given in love, will be acceptable in Jesus' eyes. Not knowing what else to do, Pepita knelt by the roadside and she gathered a handful of common weeds, fashioned them into a small bouquet. Looking at the scraggly bunch of weeds, she felt more saddened and embarrassed than ever by the humbleness of her offering. She fought back a tear as she entered the small village chapel. As she approached the altar, she remembered what Pedro's kind words were. Even the most humble gift, if given in love, will be acceptable in his eyes. She felt her spirit lift as she knelt to lay the bouquet at the foot of the nativity scene. And suddenly, the bouquet of weeds burst into blooms of brilliant red, and all who saw them were certain that they had witnessed a Christmas miracle right before their eyes. From that day on, the bright red flowers were known as the Flores de Nochebuena, or flowers of the Holy Night, for they bloomed each year during Christmas season, and thus the legend of the poinsettia was born. So the reason why we have poinsettias in Christmas time is because of this kind of a legend. It is something that's special. They only turn red during Christmas season. All right, the rest of the year they're just green. And they're nice. They're a nice leafy plant, but they're also poisonous, so don't eat them. Okay? Not a leafy green vegetable you want to have in your salad. As we continue to get closer to Christmas Day, we should prayerfully consider what kinds of gifts we're going to be getting for people. As a family, my wife and kids and I, we spend the first few hours of Christmas morning focused on gift giving as a family, not to each other, but to different ministries. Jeremiah had brought up earlier during the praises and prayer request, ADRA. So every Christmas morning we get up. Oh, was it Azariah that did? Okay, sorry, Azariah. Every Christmas morning we get up, and after we've had our personal devotion time, we go ahead and come together as a family, and we go online to ADRA's website, and we open up their virtual catalog, and we take a look at what they have. All right, so each Christmas morning, we go ahead and we find some items that we'd like to give. Sometimes it's giving a certain amount toward putting a well in a village. Other times it's to go ahead and buy meals for students that are in schools. Other times it's to build latrines. We did that a couple of times. All right, building latrines, paying for latrines to be built, buying sheep and chickens and beehives. These gifts are gifts that are meant to draw people to Christ and keep them close to Him. Because in those parts of the world, Latin America, Africa, Asia, those places, if people have to take time off of work from Sabbath, they typically do not get to keep those jobs. Okay? So when they go ahead and they convert to Christianity and they accept the Sabbath message, they oftentimes lose their livelihood because they can no longer be employed because they don't work on Saturdays. So we go ahead and we provide them with alternative ways of making money. So they can go ahead and raise bees and sell the honey. They can raise sheep and sell the wool. They can raise goats and sell the cheese and the goat milk. So these are things that you can go ahead and do as far as blessing other people in other countries. The other thing is that children in those areas, if they want to keep the Sabbath day, oftentimes Saturday is part of the school week. So if you can go ahead and find a way to bless them by providing them with a scholarship or financial means to go ahead and attend an Adventist school, that is always a helpful thing. Like I said, we have provided for meals for the students, whether they be at like an academy or at an orphanage. We'll provide meals for like a year. It's not super expensive. Thankfully, food is cheaper other places than here. But those are some other things that you can go ahead and do. So supporting education and jobs for people around the globe helps them earn a living and not have to worry about stressing that they're not able to work on Sabbaths or missing the Sabbath test during the schools. So I have two final thoughts before we go ahead and end this morning, since it's just past noon. First, even if we do not have the money to buy extravagant gifts, any gift given in love is one that's acceptable to Jesus and will most likely be received joyfully by the recipient. Gifts of time and labor will cost you no money, but can be more of a blessing to most people than any trinket you might buy them. And then second, if you receive no gifts from earthly friends or family this year, the greatest gift of all is offered to you by our Father in heaven, the gift of eternal life and a relationship with Jesus that will last forever. That was brought up earlier by you, Judy, and I thank you for it. But that is something that we always need to remember. As you said, Loa, the reason for the season. We need to go ahead and keep Jesus at the focus of everything that we do this holiday season. And remember that He is the greatest gift of all.